Claire Miller had always been the quiet one in her family. She carried herself with gentleness, never raising her voice, never demanding more than what was given. From a young age, she sacrificed her own dreams for the comfort of others, giving up opportunities so her siblings could shine, handing over her small paychecks to help cover the household bills, and enduring years of being overlooked. To her, this was love. To her family, it was weakness. That night, everything changed. The Miller household was glowing with grandeur. It was the night of a lavish party her parents had organized to celebrate a new business milestone. The hall was filled with relatives, business partners, and close friends, all dressed in glittering attire. Crystal chandeliers lit the room, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter echoed across the hall. The Miller family basked in admiration, proud of their wealth, their success, their image. And then there was Claire, standing quietly in a corner, unnoticed as always. She had chosen a simple dress, blending into the background, just as her family expected her to. She wasn't there to shine, only to support, as she had done all her life. But fate had other plans. Midway through the evening, when the party was at its peak, one of the guests casually asked, "And what about your eldest daughter, Claire? How is she doing these days?" It was an innocent question, but it struck like a dagger. Her mother smiled thinly, her voice sweet but cutting. "Oh, Claire, she's just at home. Nothing special. We honestly don't know what will ever become of her." A few guests chuckled politely, but her father added fuel to the fire. "Yes, she's more of a burden than anything else. Our other children are the real pride of this family." The room erupted with laughter. Claire felt her heart sink. Her cheeks burned, but she stood frozen in place. The words echoed in her head, a burden. Nothing special. As if that humiliation wasn't enough, her brother Ethan joined in with a mocking grin. "Dad's right. Claire's never held a real job in her life. If it weren't for us, she'd probably be starving on the streets by now." Emily, her sister, raised her glass and laughed loudly. "Let's toast to Claire, the most useless daughter in the world." The cruelty struck harder than any knife could. Guests exchanged glances. Some laughed along awkwardly, others looked away in pity. But no one defended her. Claire stood there, trembling, her hands shaking at her sides. The sting of betrayal wasn't from strangers. It was from her own family. She fought back tears, not because she didn't want to cry, but because she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She forced a faint smile, even as her heart shattered. Quietly, she slipped out onto the balcony. The night air was cold, the garden below glowing with fairy lights. She leaned on the railing, her chest heavy with pain. Their words rang in her ears. A burden. Useless. Nothing. For a moment, she believed them. For a moment, she wondered if her life truly was meaningless. But then, something shifted. As she stared into the night, anger began to rise, slow and steady, burning away the tears. They had mocked her, ridiculed her, stripped her of dignity, but they had also given her something they didn't intend. They had given her a reason to fight. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "If they think I'm nothing, then I'll show them who I really am." And from that night on, Claire Miller's life was never the same. Claire Miller left that night with a fire in her chest she had never felt before. The cruel laughter of her parents, her brother, and her sister still echoed in her ears. But instead of breaking her, it carved something sharper inside. For years, she had swallowed their insults, convinced herself that patience was love, that sacrifice was duty. But standing on that balcony, humiliated in front of 100 guests, she realized that silence had cost her everything. From that moment, she promised herself that her silence would end. The next morning, while her family slept off the indulgence of the night before, Claire sat alone at the dining table with a notebook and a pen. Her hands trembled as she wrote the first words at the top of the page. My plan. It was nothing fancy, just scribbled notes and scattered thoughts, but it was the beginning of something new. She wasn't going to run away, and she wasn't going to beg for their acceptance anymore. She was going to build her own life, one so strong that no insult, no betrayal, could ever crush her again. She threw herself into work. Her 9-to-5 office job had always been dull, overlooked by her colleagues just as she was at home. But now she saw it as a stepping stone. She worked harder than anyone else in the building, staying late to finish reports, volunteering for tasks no one wanted, watching every detail with sharp eyes. But what no one realized was that after hours, when she finally walked back to her small, plain room, she didn't rest. She opened her secondhand laptop, logged into online courses, and studied long into the night. Business management, data analytics, investment basics, subjects her siblings would never have bothered with, she devoured like oxygen. She filled notebook after notebook, writing down strategies, studying patterns, learning the secrets of money her parents never thought she was capable of understanding. Slowly, Claire began to see how power wasn't always about inheritance or a family name. Real power came from knowledge, from persistence, from refusing to stop even when the world called you useless. The family noticed her absence from dinners and outings. Her father scoffed. "She hides in her room like a hermit, see? She can't even face people after what happened at the party." Emily smirked. "She's embarrassed, Dad. Maybe she should be. She'll never be like us." Claire heard every word through the thin walls, but she didn't respond. She didn't need to. Their mockery was fuel now, not chains. Months passed, and the first fruits of her effort began to appear. Claire started freelancing in the evenings, taking on small projects for international clients. At first, the pay was barely enough to cover extra groceries, but she saved every cent. No designer clothes, no fancy dinners, no late-night splurges like Emily and Ethan. Every coin went into a separate account she had opened secretly, one no one in her family knew about. With each paycheck, that account grew, small but steady, like a seed quietly rooting itself in the soil. Her clients began to notice her reliability. She delivered early, always with precision, always with a professionalism that surprised them. Word spread quietly. More projects came, then larger ones. Within a year, Claire's savings had grown into something real, enough to move out if she wanted. But she didn't rush. She knew patience was her greatest weapon now. She would leave only when the time was right, when leaving meant freedom, not escape. Meanwhile, the cracks in her family's empire began to show. Ethan, always eager to impress, had thrown himself into flashy investments. Real estate deals that sounded golden on paper collapsed, leaving him scrambling to cover debts. Emily, addicted to luxury, swiped family credit cards like they were endless fountains, filling her closet with clothes she wore once and forgot. Their parents, so proud of their successful children, turned blind eyes to the mounting problems. But Claire noticed everything. She started keeping records. Late at night, when her brother left financial documents lying around, she copied them. When Emily tossed receipts in the trash, Claire picked them up and stored them. She created encrypted folders on her laptop, quietly building a library of evidence of their recklessness. Not because she wanted to hurt them, at least, not yet, but because she knew one day, when their house of cards began to fall, she would need the truth on her side. The turning point came one summer evening at another family gathering. This time it wasn't as grand as the last. Fewer guests, quieter laughter, but the cruelty remained the same. Ethan, already tipsy, leaned across the table and said loudly, "So, Claire, still wasting your life in that tiny job? You know, if you weren't our sister, no one would even notice you existed." Emily giggled. "She's probably still dreaming she'll be something one day." Poor Claire, always living in her own little fantasy. The guests laughed politely, not daring to offend the powerful Millers. But this time Claire didn't flinch. She smiled, a calm, almost chilling smile that made Emily pause for just a second. Claire said nothing, but inside she knew the balance was beginning to shift. She wasn't the girl they humiliated anymore. She was someone else now, someone stronger. 2 weeks later, she quietly signed a lease for a small apartment in the city. She didn't tell her family. One morning, while they were all busy with their own chaotic lives, she packed her few belongings into 2 suitcases and left. No goodbyes, no explanations. She walked into her new apartment, a simple place with bare walls and cheap furniture. But to her, it felt like a palace. For the first time, she had her own space, her own freedom, her own silence. From that apartment, Claire launched the second phase of her plan. She officially registered her consultancy firm, Miller Analytics. What began as late-night freelancing turned into a business with its own name, its own identity. She worked tirelessly, her reputation spreading through word of mouth, her clients recommending her to others. Soon she wasn't just managing small accounts. She was consulting for established companies, guiding strategies, solving problems others couldn't. Her income doubled, then tripled. She hired a small team, 2 young professionals who admired her work ethic and vision. They called her a natural leader, someone who inspired loyalty without ever raising her voice. For Claire, it was surreal. For years, her family told her she was nothing. Now strangers were trusting her with their businesses, their futures. And then, one night at a networking event, fate brought her face to face with the people who had mocked her the most. The ballroom was filled with powerful investors, CEOs, and rising entrepreneurs. Claire walked in wearing a simple navy dress, her posture confident, her smile calm. She moved from group to group, shaking hands, exchanging ideas, leaving a quiet impression wherever she went. Across the room, she heard a familiar laugh. Ethan and Emily were there too, desperately trying to charm investors for a failing project. When Ethan's eyes fell on Claire, his smirk faltered. Emily froze, her glass trembling slightly in her hand. They watched as their useless sister was greeted with respect by the very people they were struggling to impress. Claire didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply offered them a polite smile, a quiet acknowledgement that spoke louder than words. I am not the girl you humiliated anymore. As she left the ballroom that night, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, Claire knew something undeniable. The tide had turned. Her family's empire was beginning to crack, and for the first time in her life, she held the power they never thought she could, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Claire walked out of the ballroom that night with her heart steady, and her mind sharper than ever. The look on Ethan and Emily's faces still lingered in her memory. Not anger, not mockery, but fear. For the first time in her life, they had looked at her as someone who mattered, someone they couldn't ignore, and she knew that this shift was only the beginning. The empire that had once seemed untouchable was now trembling at its foundations, and Claire had a front-row seat to watch it collapse. In the weeks that followed, whispers began to circulate through the city's business circles. Ethan's flashy real estate ventures were failing at an alarming rate. His investors, once dazzled by his charm, were pulling out, leaving him scrambling to cover losses. Emily, too, was drowning in debt, her credit cards maxed, her designer clothes worth nothing compared to the financial mess she had created. And at the center of it all, their parents, still clinging to the illusion of control, were trying desperately to keep the family's name polished, while cracks widened beneath their feet. Claire, however, was soaring. Her consultancy firm was now a recognized name, her clients multiplying faster than she could handle. She hired 2 more employees, turning her tiny office into a bustling space of ambition and energy. Humiliated sister. She felt like the victor, the one who had survived, who had risen, who had finally taken control of her own story. And as she stood in her apartment, the city lights glowing outside her window, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." The knock on Claire's door that night was different. Slow, hesitant, filled with the weight of desperation. When she opened it, she found her entire family standing there. Her father, once a proud patriarch, now hollow-eyed. Her mother, her face pale and trembling. Ethan and Emily, no longer arrogant siblings but broken souls clinging to what little pride they had left. For a moment, the sight stunned Claire. These were the same people who had mocked her, humiliated her, crushed her spirit whenever they could. But tonight, they looked nothing like the giants they had pretended to be. They looked small, defeated. Her father stepped forward first. "Claire," he began, his voice heavy with shame. "We've lost everything. The company, the name. It's all gone. Lawsuits, debts, ruined deals. There's nothing left. and the world has turned its back on us. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears. But you've built something real, strong. People respect you now. Claire, please, help us. Save what's left of our family. Ethan and Emily stood silent, unable to meet her eyes. Their arrogance had melted away, replaced with regret and humiliation. Claire listened without interrupting. Every word, every plea was like a mirror reflecting the years of pain they had caused her. She thought of that night on the balcony, the laughter that had cut through her like knives, the countless insults, the loneliness. She had once prayed for their acceptance, begged for their kindness. But now? She didn't need it. Do you realize what you're asking? She said finally, her voice calm but sharp. For years, I was nothing to you. An embarrassment. A joke. You broke me down until I had nothing left but silence. And now, when your empire has fallen, you come to me, the daughter, the sister, the woman you said was worthless. Her father lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he had no defense, no excuses. I built my empire from nothing, Claire continued, brick by brick, hour by hour, not because of you, but in spite of you. And I will never let you drag me back into the darkness I escaped. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Ethan clenched his fists, struggling to speak. But Claire raised a hand, stopping them. This is where it ends, she said firmly. The cycle of humiliation, of cruelty, of lies. It ends tonight. I will not destroy you. You've already done that yourselves, but I will not save you either. You must live with the consequences of what you've done. That's the only justice there can be. Her words cut through the silence like thunder. Her family stood there, stunned, broken, unable to argue. Slowly, one by one, they turned and walked away, leaving Claire alone in the doorway. She closed the door, her heart pounding but her soul free. For the first time in her life, she felt untouchable. Not because she had power, not because she had wealth, but because she had chosen herself. She had broken free of their chains forever. Claire walked to the window, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. The skyline shimmered with possibility, with a future she had carved out of nothing. She smiled, whispering the words that had become her truth. They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. Her story was no longer one of survival, it was one of victory, and the world would soon know it. If you felt Claire's journey, the pain she endured, the strength she found, and the victory she claimed, then you know this story is more than fiction. It's about rising when everyone expects you to fall. It's about finding your worth when the world calls you worthless. And if you believe in stories that inspire, empower, and shake the heart, then don't miss what comes next. Subscribe to my channel right now, because every story I share is more than entertainment. It's a lesson, a spark, a reminder that no matter how dark life gets, there's always a way to rise. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part of this journey. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.